you folks have been to Frankfurt, Germany. All right. If you proceed east from Frankfurt, about 90 miles, then 10 miles south, is a city of 30,000 named Schweinfurt. That's the topic of our discussion tonight, is Schweinfurt. But before we get to there, any of y'all ever heard of an airplane called the Memphis Belle?
Oh, yes. Yes.
It finished the first, it was the first Air B-17 to make a 25-raid tour. They did that in the middle of May in '43. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the main headquarters in London, where all the new planes came in. It was sitting on the ramp there. I got to see it there in London. And the crew of the Memphis Belle was in that facility there, briefing the incoming members on their specialty. Pilots talking to pilots and gunners talking to gunners. And we thought those boys Memphis Belle were real brave. Instead, in talking about World War II, the older that I have become, the more emotional I have become. So you may notice that. You know, they say war is hell. Mm-hmm. You might notice my hairdo. That's the result of unpressurized, high-altitude flying. Shortly after I arrived in London, I talked to a bunch of British pilots, the RAF, and they'd been flying high for 3 years. And we asked them if there's any long-term medical problems associated with high-altitude, unpressurized flight. So Yanks, you'll become sterile and your hair will fall out. They were right. Also, a little later, as more Americans arrived in the war theater there, the British pilots there had more competition for dating their local women. And it so happened that we American pilots had about twice the payday that the British pilots did. So those of us who was interested in dating had more operating money. Our airport didn't like it. They said, you Yanks are overpaid, oversexed, and over here. That's Just before World War II, the #1 manufacturer of bearings in the world was at Schweinfurt, Germany. They were also the world's leading exporter of bearings. So in the spring of '42, when the 8th Air Force started getting ready to bomb targets in the continent, they made up a list of targets on the continent. #1 was Schweinfurt. Now, it was the most famous raid, and I'm going to tell you some of the many reasons that made it so. One is the #1 target. Another thing, it happened on my birthday, the day I was 22. 22. Let's see. Now, on this photograph, that was taken 2 months before the Schweinfurt raid, when I got back from a raid to Kiel in northern Germany, from the submarine building facilities. There I am, 21 years old, never been kissed. When we arrived at the briefing the day we were supposed to go to Schweinfurt, it's real foggy. We could barely get from the barracks to the briefing room. Summertime fog, high pressure area, stagnant air. And at the briefing, they told us that we were going to go just north of Frankfurt on a zigzag route missing fortified areas to Schweinfurt, and another bunch of B-17s from southern England. They were the E model, had more gas tanks. They were going to go to Regensburg and bomb a ME-109 assembly plant where they assembled German fighters. And then the briefer said, and then presumably land. He didn't tell us. We found out the next day that they went from there to the first shuttle raid to North Africa. And that's the problem for the Schweinfurt raid. Now in southern England, they got off about an hour, hour and a half late because their fog wasn't as bad as ours. North of London, we were 4.5 hours late getting off. Okay. When this Regensburg bunch of bombers went by Frankfurt, the Luftwaffe and the Germans knew there wasn't all the B-17s. So when they turned and went toward North Africa, it really got the Luftwaffe excited, and intercepted radio communications from the Luftwaffe indicated they were moving squadrons of fighters from northern Germany and from Berlin and from southern Germany, Paris, up to the Frankfurt area to wait on some more bombers. Okay, there was 185 B-17s that went to Schweinfurt. 185. It so happens that was the number of the defenders that was at the Alamo in 1835 when Texas had that battle at the Alamo with John Wayne, remember that? 185, the same number. Of course, we lost all of them at the Alamo, but on the Schweinfurt raid, out of the 185, we lost 61. Our group lost 5. Now, let me tell you some of the details of that. This Schweinfurt raid, they'd been waiting on good weather. It seemed like there's a lot of low clouds most of the time there in Europe. It obscured bombing targets. So they finally got a good forecast for Schweinfurt, but it was terrible there in England, that fog, see? So they scheduled that Schweinfurt raid, see? It so happened that in the previous 6 days, most of us had been on 2 to 4 other bombing raids. And the crews and the airplanes were all tired before the Schweinfurt raid, see? So to get enough bombers to make it worthwhile, they had the first, what they call ME, maximum effort. All the planes and crews they could assemble together would go to Schweinfurt. And we still didn't have enough to get a full formation. Our group supposed to have 18, we couldn't get but 16. Before we got to the French coast, 2 of them aboard, that left 14, an insufficient number for defensive firepower. Okay, out of that 14, we lost 5. Like I say, out of the 185, we lost 61. All right. When we arrived at the fighter belt line there, about 70 miles northwest of Frankfurt, these 185 B-17s were met by 300 fighters. 300. Like a swarm of bees. And the procedure for those fighters usually was to make their first attack a head-on attack, then make 1 or 2 other attacks from other directions, and by then they'd be out of ammo. But these fighters would come in 2 and 4 and sometimes 6 in formation on a head-on attacks. Now, most of them are ME-109, some of them are Focke-Wulf 190s. But the armament on those fighters was 2 20 millimeters and 4 30 calibers. Now, for those of you who don't know much about weapons, 20 millimeters about equal to 80 caliber. And it's the smallest explosive shell we have. Below that, you go to a solid bullet like a 50 caliber. And the 20 millimeter did this, see? Now these German 20 millimeters were fused to explode at 1,000 meters if they had not hit an airplane. So they wouldn't go down and shoot up the homeland, see? A spent 50 caliber is not very much of a problem, but a spent 20 millimeter would still blow up, see? So when these 20 millimeters would self-destruct at 1,000 meters, be a little gray puff of smoke. And since there was 2 of them, there'd be a pair of gray puffs of smoke, see? Now, we're going to see that a little later in this narrative. Okay, I was in these 300 fighters was against this lead group and not against the high group. For 4 or 5 minutes, we did not have an attack. Meantime, they were being decimated, see? And it wound up that all but 2 of the planes in that lead group were shot down in about 5 minutes. Now, since I was a pilot, I couldn't watch the action full time. I had to just glance at it and go back to fly formation. I did see one plane with a tail gunner, and they were about 300 yards from it. The tail gunner bailed out, and he had to shoot both on fire. Then the plane blew. Now, look back a little later when I could and saw a wing flopping through the sky and burning gasoline tanks going down. It was bad. Now, during this interval, when the lead group was under attack and we were not, I saw so much destruction and death that I got sort of sick. And like I said, we weren't under attack, so I told the co-pilot to fly out of whiles. So that's about 12 or 15 seconds I took over again. And prior to this, when we got out of that briefing I told you about when the fog was there, I told 2 of the gunners to go get some additional ammunition, all they could carry, because this is going to be a deep penetration raid. Yeah, this Schweinfurt raid was the first time we'd been that far inland, deep penetration. Also, it's a maximum effort. See? That's one of the 2 things that made it special. So it's a good thing we got that ammunition. During that day, we claimed to have shot down 3 fighters and damaged some more. And 3 months later, just before we left England, I called a team meeting just before the last raid to reminisce and exchange addresses and things. And those gunners said that on that Schweinfurt raid, there's as many attacks on our plane in that one raid as was on the whole other 24 raids combined. That's how vicious it was. Now, our plane sustained very little damage on that Schweinfurt raid. On this raid, it killed Germany 6 weeks earlier. We had 237 holes. A lot of them are just skin damage. And this raid didn't worry me any, because there wasn't any time for me to worry, because we got an attack from sort of the rear, where that Schweinfurt raid we could see it coming. Anyway,
Were you shot down on that when you got the hole in your wing? Were you shot down?
No, we on this engine here, I didn't know when we'd lose another engine because we had lots of damage, but a lot of vibration. So I turned the RPMs down as low as it would go, and the manifold pressure just enough to overcome the windmilling effect. About 14 inches of manifold pressure. Went for 2 hours back there with that bad vibration. And the engine, when we looked at it after it got off the ground, it was just about out of oil and so loose you could almost feel it in the prop. About ready to fall apart, see? Now on this Schweinfurt raid, all those bombing targets on the comet were obscured somewhat by a smoke screen. Sometimes the smoke screen was more effective. One day we were supposed to bomb a bunch of hangars at Le Bourget Airport at Paris. The Eiffel Tower was sticking up, and it's the only thing you could see in all that smoke. But that was the most severe smoke I'd seen. Another time we were supposed to bomb an airport that was 6 miles east, slightly northeast of the Palace of Versailles. And this airport had a grass landing area with a line of hangars by each street there. This pair of streets there at that airport was the same angle as those 6 streets in front of the Palace of Versailles. We almost got the Palace of Versailles that day because of the smoke screen. But they recognized the area before we got to the lead bombardier turned and went towards that little airport. Instead of getting a line of hangars there, we got one hangar and two up at Grace airstrip. Now back up to Schweinfurt. It had smoke screen, but wasn't too effective. Also, there was a small river there by Schweinfurt, and it was only 100 yards from the river to the factory. So by the curvature of the river, it helped the bombardier, the lead bombardier, bomb the target. Incidentally, on these formation bombing efforts there, we had 3 squadrons, 6 planes each. The leader of the 7th squadron was the group leader. He had a bomb sight. The plane right behind him had a bomb sight. And the 2 squadron leaders had bomb sights. All the other planes didn't have any bomb sights because they didn't need them. Procedure was to drop when the leader dropped his. See? So we hit the target somewhat there at Schweinfurt. And before I forget it, 40 years later, my wife and I went to Europe on a tourist trip. Went to my old air base site there, 80 miles north of London. Went to Schweinfurt. She did a lot of shopping. She did lots of shopping, world class. And she told this lady in this department store that I was on that Schweinfurt raid. And this was in '83, 40 years after the war. And this lady, who was about our age, said, I remember distinctly, I was 14 years old at the time. Well, since she made such a positive statement, I thought I would check her out. I asked her what time of the day it was, because we were 4 or 5 hours late. She remembered it was 2:15 in the afternoon. We should have been there at 10 o'clock that morning, hadn't it been fog. And then I got interviewed by a newspaper then and had a page, my story and a picture on the front page of the newspaper in the city of 30,000 now on that visit there. They were not mad at the Americans, they were mad at the Russians. The Americans helped them rebuild, and the Russians hold them down. Schweinfurt was just 18 miles from the East German division line there when they had Germany split there for 50 years. Okay, after we bombed this target, the turn away from that flight was to the right to go back towards England. Well, I was on, this was the formation leader here, and I was on his side, so in that turn there, I was just slightly out of position when the turn started, and I'd been flying there enough on 11 grades to know that you need to be real bold in the use of these controls and stay right in formation there. Because if you get out, it takes a while to get back in. And while you're out of formation, you become conspicuous to the fighter plane, see? Okay, 3 things happen there about the same time. When any crew member thinks that our particular plane is a target of an incoming fighter, he'll say the word action on the intercom. That is the request of the pilot to take evasive action if it's feasible. Okay, just as I got that wing up, heard this word action on the intercom, and here come a bunch of those 20-meter self-destructing right under our left wingtip. Had I not made that severe turn, if I made just about a 45-degree bank instead of a 70-degree bank, they would hit the airplane. So we was in the right place at the right time. Just so happens, see, the fortunes of war. Okay, in addition to the 300 fighters, there's a few twin-engine light bombers and twin-engine night fighters that would follow us around on our route, about 3/4 of a mile behind us, shooting at us with 37mm cannon and rockets. But they didn't, I don't think they ever hit an airplane, but they harassed you. I think I got a little worse later. The day or two after the Schweinfurt raid, I'd been overcome by all that, lost some 5 of my buddies, and all that destruction. I was in a frame of mind that I said to myself, I'll be glad when I get shot down and it'll all be over with. That's how bad it was. But after a few days I got over that, but it was bad. Anybody have any questions to ask me about this Schweinfurt raid?
You said you did some damage. How severely was the factory damaged? Do you know? Did you get it after?
What did you say, sir?
The ball bearing factory, how severe was the damage to it?
Maybe 30%.
30%?
They had it back in almost full production in a couple of months. This was on August 17th. On October the 14th, there was another raid to Schweinfurt that I happened not to be on. It wasn't a maximum effort. And they lost 60 planes on that raid. And they didn't kill it either, but some Lancaster bombers went there in February and obliterated what was left. Incidentally, when I was there in '83 as a tourist, I had a tour. About 2 or 3 miles from town in a row of hills was an underground area where they made ball bearings underground there for a while. The electric lines are still in there, and it's been a long time. That was in been 40 years, see, underground production. But I read later that Germany never did run out of ball bearings. They must have had a pretty good inventory in the pipelines. See. Now, after the meeting, I'm going to be around a while if y'all want to ask me anything else. But I'm through as far as the Schweinfurt raid is concerned, and I appreciate your kind attention. Right.